Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the latest record haul of counterfeit goods by police in Manchester. And what's so significant about it? Yet again, another example of how Brexit has made us much more vulnerable to smuggling. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. Go on then, Phil. Tell us how it's Brexit's fault that we have smuggling. Wasn't smuggling a thing when we were in the EU? Yes, of course. Don't the EU have to put up with smuggling even now? Yeah, sure. But I want to draw your attention to the scale of the fines in this and other stories from last year. So in this story, reported by the Manchester Evening News, it was an £87 million shipment of counterfeit goods, which police stopped. But the key aspect to the story was that it was a record haul. Quite literally the largest haul ever discovered by the authorities of counterfeit goods in the UK ever. And one of the largest anywhere, apparently, according to the report. I will also refer to a discovery last summer when authorities in Hull discovered 99 million cigarettes being smuggled through customs in lorries. Again, this was the largest find ever in the UK. Now let's consider why these might be the largest ever hauls of their type. Obviously, smuggling is big business for criminal gangs, whether they're trying to bypass our legal standards, as in the case with counterfeit goods, or just avoid import duties, as is the case with the cigarettes. There will always be people wanting to get goods into the country without drawing attention to the authorities. And how this is normally achieved is you hide the illicit goods in amongst those which will match the paperwork. Because ultimately, all these consignments have import documentation with them, but what is in the crate is not what is on the document. So you make sure there's loads of things that are in that consignment that are on the document, in the hope that if anyone actually checks, and you don't check everything, you can't check everything, you'll have no traffic flow at all. But if anyone actually does check the consignment in the lorry or the shipping container, they open up a crate where the contents match the report. They go, okay, this is what it says it is. And off they go. Everything else goes through. So to maximise your chances of successfully smuggling goods into the country, you need to maximise the chances of police or customs officers finding nothing untoward when they do check. It's obvious enough. But if we look at the record haul of smuggled cigarettes from last year, say in Hull, the lorry was absolutely jam-packed with them. There's actually multiple lorries, but absolutely jammed with them. But the documentation said that the cargo was birchwood logs, not cigarettes. But the authorities opened up the back of the lorry. There were just boxes and boxes right up to the back of it. Opened one up, cigarettes. Straight away. There was no hiding them in there. It wasn't like open a box, oh yeah, that's logs. Open another one, oh yeah, that's logs. And then, you know, there's a good chance they don't actually open, because they're not going to open all the boxes in the lorry. There's a good chance they don't open the ones with the cigarettes in them. But here, there was no attempt to hide it. If anyone checked that lorry, they were going to find those cigarettes. Guaranteed. No chance of a customs officer opening up any box and finding logs. Going to be cigarettes all day long. So what these smugglers had banked on was customs officers not checking the lorry at all. But this isn't usual smuggling behaviour. You have to account for the fact that every now and then something's going to get checked, don't you? You would make sure that most of the shipment included goods which do match the documentation, so that only a lucky or extremely thorough search would uncover the crime. The other problem with absolutely jamming the lorry full is that if it is discovered, the smuggler loses way more money in one go. So why do it? Because the smugglers obviously think that even a record haul being discovered now and then is just the tip of the iceberg. It's like, oh, we lost a shipment, never mind, the other 100 went through. Almost everything they are sending is clearly getting through. And it might have something to do with an announcement from HMRC in the year we left the Customs Union Single Market, 2021. The head of our Customs Authority told Parliament that they were prioritising traffic flow over checks in line with government instructions. This was despite knowing that it would probably cost the UK something like £800 million in customs duty and VAT in that year alone. So close to £1 billion just by not carrying out those checks. But we couldn't afford to carry out the checks in line with the level of risk. We couldn't. We didn't have the facilities. We didn't have the staff. We still don't. If we tried to carry out a level of checks in line with the threat of smuggling, we'd have strangled our supply of imports, meaning way worse shortages in the supermarkets and pharmacies, as well as raging inflation of basic goods. Politically unthinkable, absolutely unthinkable. So the government basically gave the green light to smugglers. This is why when our authorities do find something, because we are carrying out some checks, when they do find something, it is such a large haul. And it is because the smugglers are taking fewer precautions because they know that the chance of anyone actually checking is really tiny. So hardly anything's been checked, so they can just jam the lorry full or the shipping container. I could also bring in the story, which I mentioned a few times from last year, where authorities carried out standards checks. So this isn't customs, this is standards, over a 24-hour period. Now, to be clear, we don't carry out many customs checks, but we basically carry out no routine standards checks at all right now. Over a 24-hour period, just to see how bad the situation was. Last year, port authorities at Dover carried out an experiment. They said, look, we'll check some lorries. We'll carry out some standards checks. They checked 22 lorries in a 24-hour period. 21 of them were found to be carrying illegal food. Some of it was maggot-ridden and putrefying. Now, they caught that. They stopped that because in one 24-hour period, they decided to carry out an experiment. Bear in mind that that was it. That one day out of the 2.5 years we've been outside the single market, so, you know, no standards checks. One day out of 2.5 years we checked and 21 out of 22 lorries were found to contain illegal food, which means that every other day where the checks aren't happening, that illegal food's just getting through. And it was intended for sale in the UK, which means that we have got food for sale in the UK that does not meet even our lower standards. And all because if you lower your level of checks compared to the threat, smugglers will become increasingly emboldened to ship more goods more blatantly, because it reduces their overheads. If they could just jam everything into one consignment instead of about 10 with a load of valid goods mixed in to conceal it, much cheaper for them. So we can expect to see a steady stream of historically large hauls being discovered when they are discovered. This is because we are checking hardly anything. Smugglers are proceeding as if the risk of detection is incredibly low, which means that whenever you do see a report of a record haul, it's actually a sign that smugglers are doing so well at getting through our border security that what authorities are finding is a drop in the ocean. And it's not even like we have a plan to get our standards and customs checks up to the required level needed to lower the risk of smuggling. Like I talked earlier this week about the government's plan for standards controls again. And part of their plan is to carry on not checking certain goods at all. So their plan is basically, look, it's like, well, we can't have no checks because that's madness. We can't actually apply proper checks because, you know, we don't have the facilities or the staff. So we're going to carry out some checks to lower the risk. And yeah, carrying out some checks will lower the risk. So even though we have customs controls in place, we're still carrying out hardly any checks. And the same is going to apply to our standards controls. In order to try and avoid strangling traffic flow, it's the government's plan to just carry out some checks, but still not enough to protect us. So although something is better than nothing, we will still be experiencing higher levels of smuggling than other similarly advanced economies, which means massive losses to the Treasury in lost import duties and lower standard, possibly even dangerous goods in our market, which in turn, I suppose, makes us a higher risk market for the EU, who may have to keep evaluating things and increase the level of their own checks on our exports to them, harming our export markets even more. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.